The dreams he ignored. Thomas Bennett had always considered himself a practical man. Dreams were nothing more than the brain's way of processing daily events, random firings of neurons that held no deeper meaning. So when he started having vivid, recurring dreams 3 months ago, he dismissed them as stress from his new promotion at the architectural firm. Every night, the dreams would come in fragments: a brass door handle with intricate vine patterns, a cracked marble floor with an unusual hexagonal design, an antique elevator with ornate golden gates, and most distinctively, a woman in a red coat walking away from him down a dimly lit corridor. These images would flash through his mind like photographs in an old slideshow, but Thomas would simply roll over each morning and carry on with his day, letting the dreams fade into the background of his consciousness. His wife Sarah, however, was different. She believed in signs and symbols, in the wisdom that sometimes came wrapped in the ethereal package of dreams. "You should write them down," she'd suggest over breakfast, watching him gulp down his coffee before rushing to work. "Dreams like that, when they keep coming back, they're trying to tell you something." Thomas would just smile and kiss her cheek. "The only thing they're telling me is that I need to stop working so late," he'd say, straightening his tie before heading out the door. The architectural firm where Thomas worked was currently involved in their biggest project yet, the restoration of the historic Blackwood Hotel, a once magnificent structure that had stood empty for decades in the heart of downtown. As project manager, Thomas was responsible for overseeing every aspect of the renovation, from structural integrity to historical accuracy. One particularly cold Tuesday morning in November, Thomas arrived at the hotel for his routine site inspection. The construction crew hadn't arrived yet, and his footsteps echoed through the empty lobby as he consulted his clipboard. He needed to check the progress on the East Wing's restoration before the client's meeting that afternoon. As he walked through the building, something felt different. The air seemed heavier somehow, charged with an electricity he couldn't explain. He turned down a corridor he hadn't explored before, and his heart nearly stopped. There it was, the brass door handle with vine patterns, exactly as he had seen in his dreams. His hand trembled as he reached out to touch it, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingers. It wasn't just similar, it was identical, down to the smallest detail. With growing unease, Thomas pushed the door open. The floor beneath his feet was made of cracked marble in a hexagonal pattern, just like in his dreams. His breath caught in his throat as he moved forward, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. At the end of the corridor stood an elevator with golden gates that he had seen countless times in his sleep. The logical part of his brain scrambled for explanations. He must have seen these details in the building's original blueprints, his mind must have incorporated them into his dreams. But he knew he hadn't. This section of the hotel hadn't been in any of the documentation. As he stood there, frozen in disbelief, a movement caught his eye. At the far end of the corridor, a figure appeared, a woman in a red coat. His heart pounded as she began walking away from him, just as she had in every dream. "Wait." The word escaped his lips before he could stop himself, his voice bouncing off the walls. The woman stopped but didn't turn around. "I wondered how long it would take you to find this place," she said softly. When she finally turned to face him, Thomas felt the world tilt on its axis. She was elderly, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "I've been waiting for someone who could see," she continued. "This hotel, it holds secrets that need to be preserved." Over the next hour, the woman, who introduced herself as Eleanor Blackwood, the last living descendant of the hotel's original owner, revealed the true history of the building. The section where they stood had been sealed off decades ago, hiding architectural features that made the hotel unique, features that would have qualified it for historical protection status. "They wanted to tear it all down," Eleanor explained, running her hand along the ornate wall. "My father sealed this section to protect it, knowing that someday, the right person would find it. The hotel has a way of calling to those who need to see." Thomas thought about all the dreams he had dismissed, all the warnings and guidance he had ignored. The hotel's restoration plans would have destroyed these hidden sections entirely. His dreams hadn't been random at all, they had been leading him here, to this moment, to prevent an irreversible mistake. That evening, when Thomas returned home to Sarah, he had a different kind of story to tell over dinner. As he described his discovery, the dreams, and their meaning, she listened with a knowing smile but didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, she simply reached across the table and squeezed his hand. In the months that followed, Thomas worked with Eleanor to document the hidden sections of the hotel and revise the restoration plans to preserve its unique architectural heritage. The Blackwood Hotel's renovation became a celebration of both its visible grandeur and its secret treasures, drawing architecture enthusiasts from around the world. But perhaps more importantly, Thomas's relationship with his dreams changed forever. Each night, as he drifted off to sleep, he no longer dismissed the images that came to him. Instead, he kept a notebook by his bed, ready to record whatever messages might come in the dark hours of the night. Some dreams, he learned, were more than just dreams, they were bridges between what is and what could be, between the world we think we know and the mysteries that lie just beyond our understanding. And sometimes, in the years that followed, visitors to the restored Blackwood Hotel would report strange dreams of their own, of brass handles, marble floors, and golden elevator gates. When they mentioned these dreams to the hotel staff, they would be directed to a small plaque in the east wing that told the story of how dreams saved a piece of history, signed by Thomas Bennett, the architect who learned to listen to the whispers of his sleeping mind. Word spread quickly about the architect whose dreams had saved the Blackwood Hotel. It started small, a young artist who had recurring dreams about a rusty blue mailbox, a retired teacher haunted by visions of an old classroom clock. They would find Thomas, usually during his weekly visits to the hotel where he still served as a preservation consultant. At first, Thomas was reluctant to take on this unexpected role. "I'm an architect, not a fortune teller," he would tell Sarah over dinner, running his fingers through his gradually graying hair. But Sarah, wise as ever, would remind him, "You're someone who learned to listen. Sometimes that's all people need." And so, every Thursday afternoon, Thomas began holding informal sessions in the hotel's restored tea room. The space, with its high ceilings and Art Deco windows, seemed to naturally invite confidences. He would sit in a weathered leather armchair, listening as people shared their recurring dreams, helping them untangle the threads of meaning they couldn't quite grasp on their own. There was Maria Rodriguez, a local bakery owner who kept dreaming of a particular street corner in the old district. Following Thomas's advice to investigate the location, she discovered a vacant storefront that would become her most successful expansion, a cover copyright that would later be featured in national magazines. Then came David Chen, a medical student tormented by dreams of his grandfather's old watch repair shop. The dreams showed the shop's walls crumbling, while the watches inside kept perfect time. Thomas helped him interpret the dream's warning: the building needed structural repairs, but the family's legacy was still strong. David arrived just in time to save both the building and its precious contents, including documents that revealed his grandfather's role in helping refugees during wartime. But it was the case of Emma Walsh that truly tested Thomas's newfound abilities. Emma, a 12-year-old girl, came with her mother one rainy Thursday. She had been dreaming of a melody she couldn't quite remember when awake, played on a piano she had never seen. The dreams were making her physically ill with headaches and anxiety. In the dream, Emma explained, her feet barely touching the floor from the oversized armchair, the piano is covered in dust, except for 3 keys that shine like they're new. But every time I try to play them, I wake up. Thomas sat with this information, remembering his own dismissed dreams. "Can you describe the room where the piano is?" he asked. As Emma described the space, wood panels, a circular window, green wallpaper with golden flowers, Thomas felt a familiar tingle of recognition. He had seen that room during the hotel's renovation, but it had been empty. Working with Eleanor Blackwood's extensive family records, Thomas discovered that in the 1940s, the room had housed a Steinway grand piano. More importantly, the piano had been a crucial part of the hotel's history, used to send coded messages during the war through musical performances that seemed innocent to casual listeners. With Emma's dream as their guide, they located the piano in a private collection. The 3 shining keys in her dream corresponded to notes that, when played in sequence, revealed the location of historical documents that had been hidden within the hotel's walls. The documents, when discovered, helped several families reclaim artworks that had been lost during the war. As months passed, Thomas developed a methodology for working with dreams. He would first listen without interruption, then ask specific questions about details that seemed to repeat or stand out. He kept meticulous records of every dream and its eventual resolution, building a library of what he called dream patterns, recurring symbols, and their real-world connections. But Thomas was careful never to present himself as infallible. Dreams speak in their own language, he would often say. My role is just to help translate, but the dreamer has to write their own story. The hotel itself seemed to respond to this new role. The tea room where Thomas held his sessions became known as the Dream Room, and people claimed that simply sitting in it helped them remember dreams they had forgotten. The brass door handle that had first appeared in Thomas's dreams became a sort of unofficial landmark. People would touch it for luck before important decisions. Sarah, watching her husband's transformation from skeptic to guide, started her own tradition. Every morning, she would ask not just about his dreams, but about what he had learned from others' dreams. Their breakfast conversations became a daily reminder that the world was more mysterious and interconnected than either of them had once believed. One evening, as Thomas was locking up the dream room, Eleanor Blackwood appeared beside him, as quietly as she had that first day. You know, she said, her eyes twinkling, the hotel has always been a crossroads, not just of streets and cities, but of stories and dreams. You're helping to keep that alive. Thomas smiled, running his hand along the familiar brass door handle. I still don't understand it all, he admitted. Eleanor laughed softly. Understanding isn't always necessary. Sometimes, listening is enough. And so, the Blackwood Hotel added another layer to its rich history, becoming known not just as a masterpiece of architecture, but as a place where dreams could be heard, understood. And sometimes, when the time was right, brought into reality. Thomas Bennett, the architect who had once dismissed his dreams, became known as the dream whisperer of Blackwood Hotel, helping others find the courage to listen to the whispers of their own sleeping minds. In time, he would come to realize that architecture and dream interpretation weren't so different after all. Both required the ability to see patterns, to understand how pieces fit together, and most importantly, to believe in the possibility of bringing something new into the world, one careful step at a time. As years passed, something subtle but profound began to shift in the nature of visits to Thomas Bennett's dream room at the Blackwood Hotel. People still came with their dreams, yes, but increasingly they sought something more, wisdom that transcended mere dream interpretation. The man who had once dismissed his own dreams had somehow become a keeper of deeper truths. It began innocuously enough. A dream interpretation session with a young executive named Michael Torres evolved into a conversation about life purpose when Michael confessed, the dreams about falling aren't really about falling, are they? They are about my fear of leaving a secure job to start my own business. Thomas, now in his early 60s with silver hair and eyes that held both warmth and wisdom, smiled gently. Dreams often speak in metaphors, he said, but wisdom comes from understanding how those metaphors echo in our waking lives. Tell me, in your dreams, what do you see below you when you fall? Water, Michael replied without hesitation. Always water. And in all this time you've been dreaming of falling, have you ever hit the water? Michael's eyes widened. No. I always wake up before. Perhaps, Thomas said, leaning forward in his familiar leather chair. The dream isn't about falling at all. Water represents change, transformation. You're not falling, you're diving. But you need to make peace with the plunge. This conversation marked a turning point. Word spread that Thomas Bennett offered more than dream interpretation. He helped people understand the deeper currents of their lives. The dream room became known as the Wisdom Room, though Thomas never changed its name officially. Sarah noticed the change in her husband first. "You're not just listening to dreams anymore," she observed one evening as they walked through the hotel's garden. "You're listening to souls." Thomas squeezed her hand. "Dreams were just the beginning," he replied. "They taught me that every person carries a universe within them, full of symbols and stories that help them understand their path. Sometimes they just need someone to help them read their own map." Regular visitors to the Wisdom Room began to notice patterns in Thomas's teachings. He never gave direct advice, instead asking questions that led people to their own answers. He had a gift for finding the perfect metaphor, often drawing from architecture to illuminate life's complexities. To a couple struggling with their marriage, he spoke of load-bearing walls and careful renovation. "Some things can be changed," he explained, "but you must first understand what supports the whole structure." In relationships, as in buildings, hasty demolition can bring everything down. To an artist blocked in her creativity, he described the importance of negative space. In architecture, the spaces between are as important as the structures themselves. Sometimes what you're not creating is as significant as what you are. Eleanor Blackwood, now well into her 90s but still sharp as ever, watched this evolution with satisfaction. "The hotel has always been more than brick and mortar," she told Thomas during one of their regular meetings. "It's a nexus of stories, dreams, and now wisdom. You've become part of its foundation." One particularly memorable session involved a group of graduate students who came seeking career advice but left with something far more valuable. As they sat in a semicircle around Thomas, one asked about success. Thomas stood and walked to the window, gesturing at the hotel's intricate facade. "Look at this building," he said. "What makes it remarkable isn't just its size or grandeur, but the harmony of its elements. Success isn't about building the tallest structure, it's about creating something that resonates with truth." In architecture, as in life, beauty emerges from the relationship between form and function, between aspiration and foundation. The Wisdom Room itself seemed to adapt to this evolution. The space felt different depending on who entered and what guidance they sought. Some found it warm and comforting, others described it as having an almost cathedral-like solemnity. Thomas understood that the room, like the dreams he once interpreted, was a mirror reflecting what each seeker brought to it. As his reputation grew, Thomas remained humble, always pointing out that he was merely a student himself. "The dreams taught me to listen," he would say, "and listening taught me wisdom, but the real teacher is life itself. We are all architects of our own understanding." He began keeping a different kind of journal now, not just of dreams and their interpretations, but of the wisdom that emerged from these sessions. The journal became known as The Architect's Philosophy, though Thomas never intended to publish it. Instead, he would share relevant passages with those who needed them most. One rainy evening, as Thomas was writing in his journal, a young woman entered the Wisdom Room. She was an architect herself, struggling with a modern world that seemed to value speed over substance. Thomas listened as she described her frustration with the industry's pace, its focus on efficiency over beauty. "You know," he said, turning to the window where raindrops traced patterns on the glass, "dreams taught me something about time. In dreams, a moment can contain an eternity, and an eternity can pass in a moment. Architecture is similar, true beauty exists outside of time." The Blackwood Hotel wasn't built for a quarter or a fiscal year, it was built for generations. Build like that, and time becomes your ally, not your enemy. As dusk settled over the city, Thomas often found himself standing at the window of the wisdom room, watching the interplay of light and shadow on the streets below. He would reflect on his journey, from the practical architect who dismissed his dreams, to the dream interpreter who helped others understand their visions, to this new role as a keeper of wisdom. Sarah would sometimes join him there, their silhouettes merging with the hotel's deepening shadows. "Did you ever imagine," she would ask, "that ignoring those dreams would lead you here?" Thomas would smile, touching the brass door handle that had started it all. "Life's greatest wisdom often comes from our mistakes," he would reply. "The key is learning to listen to dreams, to buildings, to people, and mostly, to the quiet voice within that knows the way." And so, the Blackwood Hotel added yet another layer to its legacy. More than a historic building, more than a nexus of dreams, it became a sanctuary of wisdom, where people could find not just answers, but the questions that would lead them to their own understanding. Thomas Bennett, once known as the Dream Whisperer, became known simply as the Wise Man of Blackwood, though he preferred to think of himself as simply a student of life who had learned, at last, to pay attention. Thank you for watching. Please, do well to subscribe to my YouTube channel.